All right, Friday morning. I'm going to try to make a habit of recording these on Friday mornings. This is the Boxcast. It's unfiltered, raw, not programmed. There aren't a lot of graphics and giant PowerPoint presentations. I'll work on some videos and presentations coming up right now. I'm doing more research, writing, working on the education piece, which there should be an article published in a couple of weeks at Chalkboard Review. Or actually, could be any day now, Chalkboard Review. Then also my book. Volume 1, which will focus mainly on destroying the education system and rebuilding it. Volume 2 would deal more with democracy, politics, Hoppe, Burnham, etc. Those should be, they're on the works. And then I've got my short stories that I'm working on and just regular nonfiction essays. All of this can be found at theconstrainedvision.com. What you're looking at is the COVID log, which I built because I'm just really frustrated with the media, really frustrated with the government. As I said in the previous videos, I don't want to do this. I don't care about doing this. I stopped caring May 2020. Anyone who knows me or talked to me, my thought was, all right, back to normal after Easter in 2020. I reviewed the data. And then when I realized that wasn't happening, I thought, oh God, we are in trouble. The government and the media have realized what they can do. And at that point, by end of May 2020, I just had given up. I didn't want to talk about any of this. I don't care about any of this. I'm not going to make videos about any of this. And I held to that until recently, where I thought, well, you know what? I might as well share my log and show people why I knew what I knew then, what I know now. Maybe it's not going to help you. You can show these facts to someone who is dealing with what the mass formation psychosis that everyone's talking about now, or you could have heard about earlier by Matisse Desmond months ago, a year ago. But it doesn't matter. You might be able to help some people in the middle if there are still some people in the middle. People have subscribed to, they've smashed the subscribe button to their COVID religion, their ideology. That's just the way that it is. Even people that aren't woke, even people that are very rational and reasonable, fear and the mass psychosis has taken a hold of them. And you can show them the actual science, which is in this COVID log. Probably not going to help them. Maybe you'll save somebody. Maybe it'll just let yourself rest at ease. Maybe you don't want to argue it. One of the things that I would run into is that people, whoever would want to argue or fight with me, and it was for whatever reason my responsibility to remember every study that's ever been published. Meanwhile, the people who argue for the government, people that were arguing on the side of the media, people that are arguing on the side of lockdowns, people are arguing on the side of authoritarian pressure. They didn't need to cite anything. They didn't need to provide any evidence. They were right. Everyone else was wrong. Everyone else was contrarian. They didn't have to provide evidence. Meanwhile, if you questioned the narrative, if you questioned the normal theme of life, then you had to provide ample evidence. And I couldn't rattle every scientific study off the top of my head. I couldn't remember every study that happened in Israel. I couldn't remember every peak and every drop in cases. I couldn't remember what would happen in England and in Uttar Pradesh and in El Salvador. I couldn't remember all these. I couldn't remember every single study out of Hong Kong to Harvard to Johns Hopkins. I couldn't do it. And if you made one mistake, then that was it. You were completely dismissed. Oh, you're a crazy, irrational person. I'm sorry, I couldn't remember all these ideas off the top of my head. I can't keep them all cataloged. I'm doing my best. If I make a mistake, then, oh, sorry, you make one mistake, it completely derails your entire thesis. And that's how I was treated. So I thought, well, here's what I'll do. I'm just going to finally get around to categorizing it all. So when these situations come up, I'll go to theconstrainedvision.com. I'll pull up my phone and say, here's the study. Read it, you lazy bastards. Oh, you don't want to read it? Let me read you the highlighted parts. Then, if you don't believe me, here's the link to the science. Go check it out. It's all here at theconstrainedvision.com. And you can quickly, easily use it as a reference. Not that I'm trying to get you to win arguments, but for me, it was just really frustrating to see what they were doing. That's why I just don't even care. And I've fallen back into that hole recently. Like, well, if I'm going to get back in these arguments and fights, then here's the deal. I'll be the one with evidence on my side. I'll be the one with science on my side. I'll be the one that will be able to cite my sources, and they will not be. And over time, it will have to be recognized by my interlocutors that they are routinely never citing any evidence. They are routinely being proven wrong. They are routinely being given red pills. They are routinely going through cognitive dissonance. And at some point, one would believe that the spell would be lifted. So hopefully this lifts the spell. Anyway, what we got in the COVID log of our recently, what's new in the COVID log? Is that big enough on the screen for you? If not, you can go to theconstrainedvision.com and look it up. Actually, here, I don't have to be so big. I don't have to take a full screen. Yeah, that's not the case. I'm going to try to do these on Friday mornings and whatnot and try to do more, but I've got a bunch of jobs and it's pretty crazy. All right, so new stuff with Omicron. That's not new, but what's great is that it's not new. It's not new. Runny nose, headache, fatigue, sneezing, sore throat hasn't changed. It's been the same. The initial reports out of South Africa around the 20th of November, over a month ago, said this. And they said, don't worry. And people tried to freak out. And they found out in England, okay, there's nothing to worry about. And people in America tried to freak out. And they found out, oh, don't worry about it. And even in America, latest report out of the Daily Mail, you're not going to see this in the U.S. media. You go to Jack Posobiec, whether you think he's ultra conservative or right wing or whatnot, Jack Posobiec has very good sources in the White House. Jack Posobiec is very good at aggregating news sources. He's worth a follow. Whether you agree with his points of view, he provides vital information. Maybe you ignore his opinion tweets, but when he links to sources, when he links to news articles, it's useful. So he linked yesterday to a daily news article, which for some reason, suspiciously, wasn't mentioned in any of the American media. So you go to the Daily Mail. And the Daily Mail says, sorry, I was just looking. I wonder if I have anybody watching. No, we're not going to buy watching live. Maybe someday. Daily Mail says that from the data they're getting is New York's already peaked. Stop. What? This thing's over before it started. And I'm not just talking about Omicron. I know. This is what all of the YouTube people that I've been listening to, which I think I have in this slides. Let me jump down here. Do I got them listed in this one? No, I believe I got them in COVID log 2, maybe. That's COVID log 1. Let's go back to COVID log 1. And at the bottom, I've got guys that I listen to that I believe are very useful. No, that's not it. Well, it's in one. Oh, it's on my PowerPoint. Anyway, Dr. Bean, John Campbell, Dr. Bean, John Campbell, a couple other guys. There's another guy I've been listening to recently. They basically just read scientific journals to you. They help you understand. I'm not a scientist. I'd like to think of myself as a scientist, but I'm not a scientist. Okay? And that's okay. And that's fine. And I want to learn, and I enjoy people that help me learn. So Dr. Bean's good. Anyway, what they said was, let's go back to that. Learning how to do this on the fly. What they said was this is probably going to be over. And that's what the data implied. And that's what's happened. So it's over. Omicron's going to take over. Omicron is going to be the main variant. Now, there still is a little bit more Delta, according to Robert Malone. And you can look at some of the, I think I got it in here somewhere. You can see like Ohio has still a little bit of Delta. Where is it? Finding this on the fly is going to be crazy, but Delta still has a place in Ohio, and if it's still here, then it's still in other places in the States, but in places like New York, here we go. There it is. I found it. Felt it relatively quickly. So orange and then yellow. Now, this is old data. December 18th is when we're pulling from. So I would imagine, and you look from December 4th to December 18th, that's a dramatic jump. In the Ohio has pretty good data, by the way, if you want to check out some data. Link is above. You can get that through the constrained vision. So we had all Delta. That's a significant spike up towards Omicron away from Delta. So I would imagine a week later, I would imagine now it's pretty close to, I know it's got to be. Omicron's got to be the main variant. And when it becomes the main variant, it's going to, I don't know if it would push Delta into extinction, but it will be what everyone gets, and that is a runny nose, a sore throat, body fatigue, aches, pains. You can see the death rates and the cases. Look at the South African data, look at the England data. You can already see it in the American data. New York, in that article that Posobiec wrote, has already peaked. Now the other states are going to follow soon, but that means it's going to drop. It means this damn thing's over, guys. Now, the media is not going to let you know that. People are still going to worry. They're going to freak out. They're going to try to find something. I don't know. They're trying to pivot into climate change. Ain't nobody buying that. I think there's a mental fatigue. Everyone's about ready to give up. So that's good news. All right. What's some other news stuff that we got from the Omicrons? I had to go to the health department the other day to get a birth certificate so that I could get a birth certificate so that I could go get a new license. I had to jump through all these bureaucratic steps. And while sitting in the health department, one after another, people are coming in trying to get their free COVID tests. Because apparently you can't buy them anywhere, which makes sense because here's the genius of the government. The government says we are going to give billions of tests to everybody. All right. Now, the midwit would say, great, our government's going to give tests to people so that we can all get tested and we don't have to pay $20. The person who actually has a brain will realize, wait a second, the government is now getting involved in the economy. There's a finite supply of COVID tests. So imagine that there are 1 billion COVID tests. Maybe there's 1 billion COVID tests available. Who gets those tests? The free market, people are willing to buy, and then you determine your price, and that's where we determine where the tests go, and the tests go to the most efficient places, determined based on marketing price, right? If it's left to the free market to determine where the tests go, the test will go to the highest bidder. If you don't need the test, you're not going to pay $50 to test. If you really, really need the test, maybe you'll pay $70 for the test or whatever, which is pretty stupid anyway. But the fact remains that when the tests are left to the free market, the tests are distributed the most efficiently, the most effectively, and more often than not, when people have to use their own money to buy a test, they don't buy tests that they don't need. They don't buy excess tests. They are more prudent in their financial decisions because there are consequences. If you spend $1,000 on tests, yeah, you probably made a stupid mistake. So you're not going to spend $1,000. You may not even spend $100. You may not even buy one test. You may think twice about it. You'll run through the mathematical calculations in your head. Either way, there's some mathematical calculations going on. We're thinking about where should these tests go. And there's some reasonable thought. There's some rationality. Now, when the government gets involved, the government just simply buys all the tests. So from that $1 billion pool that was efficiently being distributed worldwide based on the market and needs and priorities of your financial situation, now it's just simply the government's going to buy them and give them out. So one, the government just pulls those off the market. So when people can't get tests right now, when people are selling tests on Nextdoor, it's because all the tests have been pulled off the market. Because if I'm a test seller, I can try to sell in the free market. I can try to sell to the highest bidder and hope people need the test. Or I can go the easy route, the guaranteed route, and say, well, hell, the government's going to just guarantee the purchase of these. All right, just sell them to the government. Fuck the free market. Take the guaranteed money, kids, especially as this thing winds down. Sell as many of those tests right now before they become useless, which they probably already are useless. Let's sell them now before we throw them in the dumpster and back and they end up filling up landmines, or before they start going into the, what's the whole blowholes of dolphins. It's going to happen, guys. We're going to have swabs sticking out of the blowholes of dolphins and whales. It's going to be a turtle video all over again, which is an interesting story. I believe I talked about the turtle video in my Apocalypse Never book or video. Check that out at the Constrained Vision on my YouTube page, or just read Apocalypse Never by Michael Schellenberg. Schellenberg's great. Schellenberg is absolutely great. San Francisco's great. Apocalypse Never is great. His articles at Forbes are great. His podcast appearances, brilliant. One of the things I find, I guess I kind of identify this way, is being once a very progressive, I don't want to say progressive, But being a progressive and believing in progressive ideology and subscribing to that belief system I once did, Schellenberger's the same. And to be red pilled and to see everyone has a different experience. Mine was working in public education and realizing the damage that we were doing, realizing the harm that we were doing, realizing that these progressive policies, that these modern liberal policies were creating harm. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. That was kind of my wake up. And Schellenberg has his through the environmental movement, and it's great. It's awesome to read, his story arc and where he stands today. He still is a liberal. He still has a lot of those progressive views, but he understands that the implementation of progressive policy is a serious problem. He wants to help people. He has a huge heart. I think I have a huge heart as well. But I also realize that maybe I can help people. Maybe we can help each other. But a massive non-government organization, a massive government organization, those tend to cause a lot of top-down problems. Anyway, where was I on the soapbox? Talking about, hell. So before Schellenberg, we were talking about buying all the tests. So the government buys all the tests, pulls those off the market, and so now you can't get a test. Great. And so that's why I was in the health department. Set that story right here. But back to the idea that the government now has these tests. Now, how's the government going to distribute these tests? How is the government going to determine who needs a test, who doesn't need the test? How's the government going to determine how many tests need to go to certain people? They can't. You now have who thought that we would ever come to the point where we have centrally planned COVID testing? Central planning doesn't work. We got road to serfdom. I know it was right close by. Where is road to serfdom? I just saw it yesterday. I see these every day. Of course, now that I need to pull it out, it's not going to pull it out. What's this guy talking about? Well, it's in here somewhere. Hayek, Road to Serfdom, very much picks apart any ideas of central planning. And a central plan is a plan against competition. Without competition, you don't get the correct distribution of resources, products, and services. Anyway, you can see it. Me being at the health department, COVID positive person after COVID positive person walking into that small little COVID waiting room where I'm trying to get my birth certificate, coming in, hey, can I get a free test? Hey, can I get a free test? So they were unable to get the resources and goods that they could needed on the free market because the government had sucked them all up, and the government decided that it was going to disseminate the tests, and of which we know that it will be fraught with all sorts of error. They will not get the tests out in a timely manner. How can they get them out in a timely manner? The government doesn't have semi-trucks. The government doesn't have distribution warehouses. The government doesn't have the damn resources to do this. And in that perfect example, how is the government distributing these? Oh, we'll just give them to the health departments. How is that better? So the health department worker who is supposed to be spending their time dealing with the health or getting someone their social security or their birth certificate or whatever, instead they spend all day, and I watched the lady. She couldn't do her job because every 2 minutes she had to go get a box, open a box which contained like 8 tests. Can we get a box that carries at least 15 tests in it? Just open the box, get the boxes out, provide the boxes, and because it was a government agency, she had to read, you have to do this, this, and this, because this is a specific test that has to go to this specific website because we need the data to be reported to our government agency. Oh my God. So she could no longer do her job because of this government intervention. There's so many things. Whereas, you know what? I just go to Walmart, scan the damn thing, and I'm gone. And if I need it, I get it. If I don't need it, I don't get it. Now here, it's how do you determine how many tests people get? I want 5. Well, I'm not supposed to give you 5. Well, I got 5 kids. I don't know. I'm just a government employee. Get out of here. Here's your 5 damn tests. I want 20. I'm not giving you that many. What do you mean you're not? Okay, here, just take the test. Get out of here. It's who? I want to say, who runs this government? I'll tell you who runs the government. The government. Who thinks these things are good ideas? And it's crazy. Like, people are praising, yes, our administration's going to get tested people. You morons. You have no brains whatsoever. Can you not anticipate what will happen? Well, you only know because you were sitting in a health department getting exposed to COVID over and over and over and over and over. I couldn't think of a worse situation with Omicron being as transmissive as it is. And I'm sitting there and half of them didn't have masks on. And every person came in, yeah, I got COVID. And they would tell their story. Then why are you here getting a test if you know you have it? And you're obviously not on your deathbed and you're not really that symptomatic. Is it really that important that you come get this test and find out? What the hell are we doing? Do you guys have no brains left? Maybe they had a reason. If they get a positive test, they could go do something or whatever, or not do something or whatever. Anyway, so but I thought for sure, like, well, that's it, man. I've been dodging this thing for years. Been just freaking beating the game. And now here it is because I got to go get my license, which then requires me to go get a birth certificate. So then I got to go sit in the health department and get exposed over and over and over. But nope, I escaped it again. Knock on wood. Although at this point, to get exposed to Omicron and get it over with, which, it actually doesn't mean anything. Because remember, a year ago, if you got exposed to it, then you were good, you're in the clear, everybody was cool with that. Now it's like, all right, well, we don't care if you've got natural immunity. You can't make this stuff up. I mean, imagine that. Even the most woke, radical lunatics, fringe of our society, not fringe, the main establishment, if you told them in August of 2020 that their natural immunity didn't count, they'd say, get the hell out of here. What do you mean our natural immunity doesn't count? And then if you told them, no, the media is going to guarantee you that it doesn't count. The government, by law, will not count it. Imagine August of 2020 telling your wokest friend, your most blue-pilled friend, your Biden Kamala truther. Imagine telling them that, oh, hey, by the way, the government in a year is going to tell you that your natural immunity doesn't count and you will have legal rights taken away. They would say, you're crazy. But they're not. You're not crazy. It happened. Can't make this stuff up. All right, back to the COVID log. Let's see. This is a new one. Omicron infection enhances neutralizing immunity against the Delta variant. I believe Dr. Bean talked about this. I believe Dr. John Campbell talked about this. And what this is basically saying is if you get Omicron, the Omicron antibodies with all the spike protein mutations will neutralize and fight Delta. But what the studies are showing is if you got Delta, Alpha, Beta, or Beta, as Dr. John Campbell will say, doesn't necessarily fight it off. So you can get the Delta variant, then you can get the Omicron variant. Can you get the same variant twice? That looks like a no. That's what Peter McCulloch says. So you probably can't get Delta twice because your body has defeated, I don't want to say sure, but this is typically how it works. Your body knows Delta, it can stop Delta. Your body doesn't necessarily know Omicron. This is a different version of this SARS coronavirus. And so if you get Delta, all bets are off. And we've seen a lot of people with vaccine status, people who have natural immunity status, have had Delta or whatever, or Omicron or the vaccine and still get Omicron. And I would suppose it's similar to just because you had the flu in 2019 doesn't mean, I can never get the flu again. Well, every year there's a different strain of the flu. And it's different. So your body might do a decent job at protecting against it. And there's an article in here, I don't know where it is, but it talks about how original coronaviruses, your seasonal colds, they build like natural T-cell responses. And so those do carry over against further future coronaviruses. And they may help a little bit with SARS-CoV-2. I'm not sure. That was an early 2020 study. We haven't seen a lot more research on that. But Delta exposure, vaccine exposure may not prevent infection, but it likely does prevent severe cases. But the easiest way to understand this paper is if you got Omicron, it will fight Delta. If you got Delta, it doesn't work the other way. Your Delta exposure, it might limit severe illness. It might limit hospitalization, but because of the spike protein mutations, all 30 whatever of them, we're not seeing it work both ways. So less there was an enhancement of Delta virus neutralization fourfold. So yes, sometimes like Omicron is a replication in the respiratory tract. We know that. We've known that. If you've been watching this channel, if you've been reading the COVID log, you knew this when it was happening in South Africa. What else? Mouses. So they've been studying mice a lot, apparently. I guess there's a lot of like coronaviruses work over. So the variant is highly transmissible. We know that. It evades the neutralizing antibodies. We know that. What else? More of the upper respiratory in the mice than so in the lungs, which we're also seeing in the humans. Apparently, throughout this whole pandemic, mice studies have been very effective, which has actually created kind of a weird angle we're about to get to in a second. But not only is the data showing up and the anecdotal reports from the doctors in South Africa, but we're also seeing this in the studies with the mice. Syrian hamsters, again, they do the same thing, and they're finding a lower viral load in the lungs with Omicron. Again, that's good. Up here, where it's original coronavirus, and there's slides in here that explain this. That's all good news. We like seeing that. Omicron virus causes attenuated infection and disease. And attenuated means less, weaker. I had to Google that one up. I was like, I think attenuate. Let me give you the textbook definition. Always learning, right? You gotta admit when you don't know stuff. You gotta know when you Google stuff up. Having been reduced in force, effect, or value. That is attenuated. I think I know what it is, but I want to make sure I double check it. It's all right. I don't mind being. Look, if you're a teacher, you're constantly wrong. There's sometimes where you just gotta go with it because you need the respect of the kids, and you just go, all right, I'm wrong on that one, but I got to double down because I got to make sure I maintain respect. But there are other times where it's okay to you let your guard down and let the students know, no, I'm human. I make mistakes as well. And so if I could admit that, if you could model the behavior of always learning and asking questions of yourself, then you can get them to do the same thing. You got to know when to do that move and who to do that move with. With a more mischievous, obnoxious, ornery, malevolent child, you don't really want to do that. But with the curious, intellectual, gifted, or maybe borderline, maybe waking up to education, then you do that. You got to know when. I don't know. Can't tell you all my tricks. Hypertransmissible SARS-CoV-2. Where's the one that evidence? This is the one that Campbell is now talking about. You're starting to see this pop up. Evidence for mouse origin of SARS-CoV-2 Omicron variant. Now, when you hear this, like, what kind of conspiracy? This is not even a preprint, folks. This has already been approved, published December 24th, 2021. Evidence of mouse origins of the SARS-CoV-2. So basically, what they think happened was, based on their reports, is that Omicron or that Delta or SARS-CoV-2 got into mice. It mutated into mice. That's where we get all these different spike mutations. I think they talk about stronger positive selection, blah, blah, blah. So it jumped into mice, and then it went through all those mutations in mice and then jumped back into humans. And that's how Omicron, because Omicron is really, really different from Delta. Strangely different from Delta, which, one tinfoil hat would say, boy, if this first thing was genetically created in a lab, now we have this huge jump from Delta to Omicron. What explains this huge jump? What explains all these different spike protein mutations? Whereas the first big change to the creation made this thing really bad. And then someone stepped in. I don't want to say that. Theoretically, there was another intervention to make this thing not really bad. But you had, like the first time around, you really had to try hard to design SARS-CoV-2. You had to perfectly make it very deadly, and it was perfectly designed. And you can see plenty of, there's talks about that in the Cove. You can watch other videos. I think Brett Weinstein talks about that a lot. Well, now it's almost perfectly designed to be an upper respiratory, like almost like someone decided, all right, my work here is done. Turn it off. Shut the machine down, and intentionally rearranged it. Or it went into mice, and through mice, it went through all these magnificent mutations, and then went back into humans. And so, all right, well, that's random. That's great. That's awesome. I guess it happens. Or that is a very convenient explanation as to why this thing's just over all of a sudden. Then there's also the idea that, well, like we just mentioned, where have we been testing coronaviruses? Oh, I don't know. In mice? What's the chances that a mouse got loose? And so one of those mice that we have been running these tests on, is that how it happened? I don't know. If it did, well then, if the first time they messed up in the lab and it killed millions of people, well, I guess this mistake in the lab is great. So that's the late breaking news. What else we got? That's not new. Looking at cases, you can see this is already dropping. Is this England? I believe purple is your Delta, or green's Delta. You can see Omicron's already taking over, and you can also see Omicron's already falling. I believe that's England. You can see this is dated. Africa's old. There's the model that predicted this thing would be spread all over the world. Click on that link. That was from weeks ago, and I think it's pretty much held up. And that's old. Let's see. Stuff that was interesting. They did that. Christmas lockdown in the Netherlands. 86% of the adults in the Netherlands are vaccinated. And they had a massive surge. You don't have to be a scientist to figure out what 86% of the people in the Netherlands are vaccinated. And everyone got it. Well, guess what? Your vaccine didn't help you. Your vaccine didn't help you from spreading to other people. You didn't serve the greater good. You didn't take one for the team. You weren't egalitarian. Not egalitarian. You were not not utilitarian. Whatever. The word's in my brain somewhere. And it's not going to come out. Either way, you didn't do your part. There never was a part to do. Getting the vaccine doesn't spread it. All the vaccine does is prevent you possibly from having severe illness, which then possibly prevents you from taking up a hospital bed. But even from there, it's a major stretch to assume that because you didn't get vaccinated and then you got it, and then you happen to be one of the people that was severe, and then you took up a hospital bed, well, you could be vaccinated too and still taking up a hospital bed. Are we not allowed taking up hospital beds? It's just absolutely insane, the logic that has to go into everyone has to get this vaccine. Why? Well, so you don't take up hospital beds. Well, what are they there for? Well, the hospital beds are there for people that are sick. Okay, well, how did they get there? How did they get to that hospital? Why are they sick? Why are they taking up a bed? Why are they allowed to take up a bed? Because they're sick. I'm sick. I get to take up a bed, right? Well, you didn't get the vaccine. So no, you don't get to take up a hospital bed. You have to be shamed. Okay, well, what about the other person? They're overweight. They were eating inappropriately. They weren't taking care of their body. They got sick. They're taking a hospital bed. We're not going to shame them. It's okay. They made poor choices. And I don't even know if it's a poor choice, but they made choices. They made choices that landed them in a hospital bed. But that's okay. My choices that possibly landed me in a hospital bed, they're not okay. What are we talking about? I mean, someone has an abortion. They're going to take up a hospital bed. That's an okay choice, I guess. They're right? They're wrong? I don't care. Let them take up a hospital bed. I'm not going to shame them. I'm not going to judge them. I don't know what the decisions are going on. I don't know why they slept with people that they slept with. Maybe they were raped. Maybe a horrible situation happened. Maybe they're just frivolously having an abortion. Maybe they have a medical condition. I don't know. There's a lot of complicated issues there. I'm not going to simply just say, I don't like the choice that you made. You can't take up this hospital bed. I wouldn't say that to someone who needs to have an abortion. I wouldn't say that someone has to have an operation, whether it's life-saving or whether it's cosmetic. I'm not going to judge people. I'm not going to tell them what to do. It's none of my business, I guess. I mean, and I think that's been most of people's beliefs, that your health is your health. And if you want to live unhealthy, or if you want to make poor decisions, or maybe you just accidentally make a wrong choice, maybe you were just driving too fast. A lot of people every day go to the hospital because they made poor decisions on the road. They didn't make a poor decision driving their car because they're a malevolent person. They didn't make poor decisions on the road because they're evil. They made a mistake. Now they're taking up a hospital bed. I'm not going to shame them. Maybe they did. Maybe they constantly make mistakes. Maybe they're always speeding. Maybe you're always speeding. Maybe you're not the safest driver. And maybe you got into a wreck one day And I have a choice. I can shame you and say, well, you deserve to die. Or I can feel sympathy and empathy for you because you're a fellow human being. I'm going to choose empathy and sympathy for you. And I want to feel empathy and sympathy for these 86% of adults who got COVID despite getting vaccine status up to date. That's old stuff. We got all this stuff from Omicron. Let's see. Let me jump around here. What we got? That's more Omicron. It's kind of hard to navigate these slides without a plan. But this is just a soapbox thing. I'm on here ranting anyway. Hospital data. We'll look at the data. You're going to see that it spiked up. But again, the majority of hospitals, not even close, it's for people with other issues. And I guess people just set their own rule. Oh, we're above 10%. That's more than we were. You know, you can look again through the COVID log and you can see what the regular, when we have influenza outbreaks, how high those numbers go. And when influenza every year would surge and they would build tents that they didn't use half the time, no one shamed the people that got influenza. People just dealt with it. And they said, all right, yeah, that hospitals will surge at times. It's going to happen. There isn't a hard number. Well, until now, until recently. Either way, you can see that we are using 77% of the beds in the country. 17% are. The reality is, for the people that want to believe the narrative that the government has created, that this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, which again, you go back to that Netherlands. Obviously, it's not a pandemic of the unvaccinated. If Netherlands, 86% are, and there's a Danish study as well in the COVID log, in the Omicron section. If 86% of the people in the Netherlands are vaccinated and they have a surge of Omicron, it cannot possibly be a pandemic of the unvaccinated. It's so stupid. I cannot believe they're still using this messaging. But then again, it's the same government that said there's going to be a winter of death for you people. And then a week later says, oh, by the way, it's only 5 days now. Then you guys go out and live your lives again. We're going to shorten the time window. But wait a second. I thought this was a winter of death. But now we only have to quarantine for 5 days? Why are we quarantining for less? Is this less severe? It's less severe. Oh, but you said it was a pandemic of death. And you ask the government that, and they just look at you like, good. I'm saying words. I'm asking you a question. You just said this was a pandemic of death. Now, a week later, you say it's less severe. So less severe that we now only have to quarantine for 5 days. So, going back to your original point, government, you said this was a pandemic of death, of the unvaccinated, a winter of death. Can you explain that? And then the government just looks at you with a cold, silent face and acts like you're not even speaking, like you're not even there. There will be no response to you. We are not a government to serve you. We are not a government of the people, for the people, by the people. We are a government telling the people what to do, restricting the people. It's not for the people. It's not by the people. It's not of the people. It's a government of the government, for the government, by the government. And that's very clear. Anyone that still believes in the Gettysburg Address is a lunatic. Just listen to the Gettysburg Address and then say, does our government do that? Is it of the people? Well, there's human beings. Yes, there's human beings in the government. Give me a freaking break. Anyways, there's some of those numbers. And you can see they're up. And I get it. The people are at ICU beds. Oh, it's too high. But there's no number that was ever going to satisfy people. It doesn't matter. The numbers had dropped and people are still freaking out. So when obviously when the numbers go up, they're going to freak out more. There was never a number. And if to prove a point, ask people, well, what was your number before for the pandemic? Ask people what number would have been suitable before. And they probably thought a number. And you can probably point to that number and say, okay, well, did you calm down on that day? These numbers, you want people in the hospital. We want to use the hospitals. You don't want to overwhelm the hospitals. You don't want to overwhelm the ICUs, but you want to use as much as you can. It's simple economics. It's a simple use of resources. If they're not using it, they're wasting it. And if they're wasting space, they're losing money. If they're losing money, they have to start cutting costs. Just like any business or any operation or any school. Well, schools get away with this, unfortunately. But if you're not using something efficiently, then you know what that means? I mean, stop. If you're not efficiently using something, then you are wasting it. Now, what happens if you have waste hour after hour, day after day? You're losing money. And if you continue to lose money, you can go out of business or you can cut costs. How you cut costs? Well, you got to shrink your hospital. That's not good. You can fire your staff. That's not good. You can cut benefits. That's not good. So how then do we prevent that from happening? How do we keep wages high? How do we keep benefits high? How do we keep people on staff? How do we keep hospitals large? You keep them occupied. You keep people in the beds. You keep people going through the beds. You keep serving people. You keep churning out profit. You can't explain that to people. People want to imagine a world where we have empty hospitals. They want these numbers to be very low, but they don't realize that if hospitals sit empty, then hospitals shut down. And then when we need the hospitals, they're not there. It's just, you couldn't explain this to people in March of 2020. I get it. But now, the fact that people still don't understand this very simple concept that you don't want to overflow them, but you want to push it, just like with a workout. You don't want to kill yourself working out because then you're probably not going to work out for a couple of days and then it's going to throw you all off. But you don't want to be too light because then you're just wasting your time. Any athlete knows this. Anyone who's doing research knows this. Anyone who studies knows this. If you are burning yourself out studying, you're probably not going to make it. But if you're not doing enough work, if you're not doing enough homework, if you're not reading enough, if you're not practicing enough of whatever it is that you practice, then you're not going to get better. You need to find that maximum. What book? I think it was in Atomic Habits. And there's that, what the hell is that? He's got a name of it. I could probably run over and grab it. All right, since we're wrapping up. I don't even know if we really talked about anything, but this is my soapbox cast, and I've gone 41 minutes here talking about whatever, but that's just what it is. Just use as talking points. I might bring some people on here at some point. This is all, how am I ever going to find this? Just to find a stupid term that I want to find. But welcome to my borderline autistic brain that I can't help it. I've got to find this. I thought it was in section 4. It's a really good book. I put off reading it for a very long time. I think everyone kind of does, like with self-help books. This is, so the whole thing, it's habits, right? And atomic means powerful. But atomic also means very small. Really smart idea. So these small little things that you can do can have big, profound, powerful changes. And very helpful, very interesting, very easy, quick read. Just a simple guy writing a simple book. I would highly recommend it. I put off reading it for a very long time. Son of a... Use your brain, Pierce. How would you find this thing? I figured I would have marked it with a big notey thingy. And because there was a chart on that page where he talks about what this thing's called. The Goldilocks zone. There it is. All right, that's close enough. This might not be exactly the thing that I was looking at. But, trying to stay in the zone. Well, this probably make it better. Yeah. Okay. Apparently, I don't know how to work it. Oh, there it is. This camera here. So, the Goldilocks zone. You have boredom. You have failure. He's talking more about attention, but there's also a part here where it talks about like exerting yourself, doing things that are too hard, and then you fail and you quit, but doing things that are too easy, and then you don't get better. The Goldilocks rule, staying motivated and pushing yourself. You need just enough winning to experience satisfaction, just enough wanting to experience desire. Mastery requires practice, but the more you practice something, the more boring and routine it becomes. You got to be able to overcome that. Men desire novelty to such an extent. This is Machiavelli, by the way. Machiavelli says, men desire novelty to such an extent that those who are doing well wish for change as much as those who are doing badly. It's very interesting. I feel like I go through that too with all these different videos I create. Got to fight that. Stepping up when it's annoying or painful or draining to do so. That's what makes the difference between professional and an amateur. Professionals stick to the schedule. Amateurs let life get in the way. Professionals know what is important to them and work toward it with purpose. Amateurs get pulled off course by urgencies of life. So I'm really trying to work on that. I can see how I've fallen into that problem a lot of times. The only way to become excellent is to be endlessly fascinated by doing the same thing over and over and over and over. That's something I definitely do subscribe to. Anyway, really good. But the point of that was back to it. You need the hospitals to be overrun. Not overrun. Sorry. You want to push them kind of to the max. All right. So as we wrap up, boys and girls, children of all ages, we'll go me big and it's small. The COVID log is at theconstrainedvision.com. You see my YouTube channel. Constrained Algo is my Twitter handle. I don't really have much there. Still working on that. Constrained Algo. So hopefully I have a little bit more organized thought, but you can jump into the Constrained Vision and go to my website and you can read this on your own. And you can say, well, I don't want to read about Omicron. I want to read about, hell, I got a couple of minutes. Let me jump into some of the newer stuff that I've got. Yeah. So if I go to Constrained Vision, one of the things I've been doing has been updating like my different, what I've been updating. When I go through this thing, I'm the worst keyboardist in the world. All right. So what have I updated recently? On the 5th, government. All right. Government is in section 2. As we wrap her up. There's no way it's going to. All right. Here's how I'll do this. What slide do I want to go to? All right. Yeah. I need more coffee. I got to work here in a couple minutes. Which means I sit right here, but I still have to clock in. Government policy is on slide 48. So this was talked about by Chris Martinson at Peak Prosperity. You should subscribe to Peak Prosperity. Been a follower since early 2020. He was on top of it. Early 2020, who you needed to be listening to was Bannon. As much as people hate it, whatever. Thing is, I'm not going to open that can of worms. But the War Room was ahead of everything. Poso. I don't know. Poso. Cernovich was ahead of it. But Peak Prosperity was there. Chris Martinson, doctor. He's a doctor. All right, government policy. What we got? This was talked about on Peak Prosperity, how the Attorney General of New York is threatening doctors. What the hell are we doing? And threatening to take their license away if they give out ivermectin. And they're threatening out-of-state doctors. And the New York Attorney General, which is, last time I checked, it's a lawyer, not a scientist, is threatening them because of, and it's listed here. Isn't it in here? Yeah, so there's the 3 falsehoods. So the Attorney General says, all right, we're going to take your license away because you're prescribing ivermectin to people in New York. And there's 3 things that we know. And they list the 3 things. And in the article, and this was the frontline COVID care workers, broke this down and proved like, no, all 3 of the reasons that you are threatening to take their license away are false. Here are the facts. One, like the big one is some media disinformation. The New York Times reports that 70% of phone calls in Mississippi, like who fucking cares about Mississippi? But 70% of the calls were over ivermectin overdoses, and the New York Times runs with that, and all their readers read it, and all the people who are these crazy idiots go with it, and then days later, the New York Times goes, oh, hey, by the way, actually, it's not 70% at all. It's, if you look closer, no, that was false. They had to retract it, right? But no one ever gets the retractions. Doesn't matter. People just... Anyway, the real number was there was 2%, and 70% of those 2%. In fact, the ivermectin related calls represented 2%. So people calling Mississippi, they said the New York Times, oh, great lady, that's supposed to know all this stuff. They said that 70% of the calls to the Mississippi health department were over ivermectin. Well, no. Actually, it was 2% of the calls to the health department were over ivermectin. And 70% of that 2% was over ivermectin horse dewormers or veterinarian supplies of. So actually 1.4%. The New York Times reports that 1.4% of calls to the health department, which is probably like 3 calls in Mississippi. The New York Times reports that 3 people in Mississippi called the health department over veterinarian grade ivermectin. Is that a New York Times article? New York Times reports that 3 people in Mississippi called the health department over veterinarian grade ivermectin. And the Attorney General is going to take license away from people because they believe that the report says that 70% of people, which is probably only like 18 people to begin with, 18 people, even if it were true, 18 people in Mississippi called the health department. So we're going to take your license away. Us, the New York Attorney General, is going to take a license away from a doctor in Michigan. What the hell are we doing? What is going on? Like, this is a comedy with the New York Attorney General is going to take a license away from a Michigan doctor based on a report from Michigan that at most was 17 people, but actually it wasn't at all. It was probably one person made one phone call, but yet the New York Attorney General doesn't admit that. They go with the false number. The New York Attorney General still takes the fake number, which fine, take the fake number. The fake number is maybe a handful of people in another state, from your state, from their state. What are we doing? Well, so-and-so said this, so I'm going to take your license away. What is wrong with you? There's more of that. All right, so that's the one that was in Chris Martinson was talking about that. What else we got? The El Salvador video, I would check this out. Martinson brought this one up, and it's good because it shows like, hey, here's what a rational, reasonable, understanding government. El Salvador also has Bitcoin as one of their main currencies. They're doing a lot of, so I don't usually use the word progressive, but if I actually want to talk towards moving towards some sort of better future, I believe that's a proper use of the word progressive, unlike what we use progressive meaning in liberal politics, which is actually very regressive, which is very destructive. But if we were to look at a country and a state and a government making prudent choices and are really serving the people, working for the people, working with the people, of the people, El Salvador is your country. El Salvador Abraham Lincoln. That's scary. That was Coleman Hughes and talking about, basically Marxism, neo-Marxism in our, which everyone saw it coming. You saw this coming years ago. Oh, well, that's just crazy academics. No, these neo-Marxist practices are going to find their way into every institution in society. And so you will be turned away based on, it's all the racism is just coming right back, which by the way, someone recommended that I read John McWhorter's Woke Racism. And I did. I ordered it, so I'll be reading that in a couple days. I have Losing the Race somewhere here, which is really good, which I highly recommend. That's like 20 years ago, which again is very prescient now. So when you guys make book recommendations, I got a list. Like I'm reading a bunch of Vonnegut, I'm reading a bunch of McWhorter. I got a couple soul books I'm reading now. It's overwhelming. Okay, so what else do I got updated here? The children's stuff I think is interesting. So let's go to the children's stuff. That is on slide 173. And this is the one, like, I would really recommend going to the children's section. Why are you going to go? Because that's not the one I want. Oh, did it not load every slide up? Is the damn thing too big? I think it is. I think that slideshow is too big for this. It is. It's too big for it. Well, I gotta do a screen share here. I got enough time. Come on, I won't let you down. Well, whatever. I'll just cut to me talking, and I will read it to you out loud. That's unbelievable. It's too big. You can only go 100 slides. Wow. All right. So we'll wrap up with me. And I'll just jump to the slide over here. So, the children data is good, ultimately. But this was from, I think Chris Martin was talking about this, and I've talked about this before as well. One of the things that people who are really pretty reasonable and rational, and you want to talk some sense into them, they'll still go to the old multi-system inflammatory syndrome in children, MISC. Like when they run out of cards to freak you out, they will go to MISC. This is what you're going to find out. Like you can prove all this data, and they're like, all right, well, we got to find some way to freak out about kids. All right. So when they go to MISC, it's extremely rare. They know it's extremely rare. Most people have had the Kurosawa spell broken, so they don't believe in that one anymore, but they still believe in multi-inflammatory syndrome in children. And so they freak out about their kids. And so they refuse to wake up and accept that your kid's probably more likely to die from a bee sting than they are from MISC. But if you go to slide, I think it's slide 176 in the second part, schools and children, it breaks down the data. There's another report that goes through this as well and talks about MISC, talks about the children deaths, children hospitalizations. This is a CDC report, by the way, which the CDC says, hey, it's kind of crazy. You know, we're a couple years into this and we have almost no data on kids. Yeah. What have you been doing for 2 years? I mean, here are the exact words. Clinical signs and symptoms, illness course, and factors contributing to hospitalization during the period of Delta predominance have not been well described in pediatric patients. Yeah, so what are you doing when you have a pediatric patient and you're serving them and you're documenting them? Are you just throwing that in the trash? Like, oh, here's the symptoms that we saw. Okay, I could share this with people. We could have a study about people. Nah, what are you doing? So at least the CDC comes out and says, hey, you know, we probably should be documenting this. I don't know, aren't we scientists? At least they admitted that, but people. But I think one of the kind of things that you overlook is the reason why they're not reporting it, because it's not a big deal. You know, if it was a big deal, if there were kids dropping dead, if kids were getting hospitalized, if there was very serious issues with children and the coronavirus, with SARS-CoV-2, with COVID, then doctors would be reporting it. There would be studies everywhere. People would be panicked. They'd be rushing around. The fact that the CDC comes out and says, this has not been well described, hasn't been well documented. Because there's nothing to document. There's nothing to describe. And that includes MISC too. And when it does, MISC, very rare, 2.7%. And even when it does happen, what we are seeing is it's happening mainly in obese kids. And you can see the data here. It's kids that are overweight. It's kids that have obesity. Kids that more often than not are in low economic environments. I'm not going to go into details, but you can find it out. So if you're talking to one of those people and they're freaking out about MISC, they're freaking out about the kids, but you can point to the data. You can show them that, all right, is your kid really obese? And are you poor? Okay. All right. Let's say that they're poor. You probably can't talk about that one. You got to let that one go. Do your best. Hopefully they're getting free services. But if the kid's overweight, like, why are you freaking out about it now? If your kid is obese, you probably should have been dealing with this sooner. You probably should have been worried about this sooner. You need to work on that. Maybe you should worry about coronavirus, but you should also worry about your kid being unhealthy. You should worry about your kid being unhealthy, not about the world, not about the environment, not about a virus. You should be worrying about your kid, the choices that your child's making, and the choices that you are making for your child. There's no one else to blame. You don't need to shut down the government. You don't need to shut down the world. You need to start doing a better job. Your child needs to start doing a better job. You are at risk because you put yourself at risk. Now, if your child's not obese, then you don't got to worry about multi-inflammatory syndrome. If you're not of a low economic status, which makes you more subject to other comorbidities, then you don't have to worry about multi-inflammatory syndrome. And if you take multi-inflammatory syndrome off the table, then there's really nothing to worry about. And if you can explain that to someone, then you take away, and again, another one of the final pieces. That's one of the last pieces that they will use to stay in their crazy COVID bubblehead. Hive mind. All right, that's going to wrap it up. I can't believe I went 59 minutes. TheConstrainedVision.com. That's where you can find the COVID log. That's where you can find my works of fiction writing, nonfiction writing, my collection of Thomas Sowell videos, my quick lessons from books videos, my social studies curriculum that is available at socialstudiesgames.net, my science curriculum. You can teach your child or yourself science, social studies, to yourself or your child at socialstudiesgames.net or science at sciencestudygames.com. The links are at theconstrainedvision.com. Please subscribe, share, like the videos. Check out the chalkboard review. Should have an Edie Hirsch article coming up there soon. Hope to have more content coming your way. Keep working on these soapbox casts. It's kind of fun. Maybe maniacal.